So I did my presentation on the psychology of concussions. A concussion is caused by a direct blow or bump or like the jolting of the brain. So from whiplash, your brain jolts, and that's how you can get a concussion. Anytime the brain is violently shaken, it can result in a concussion. It is the most common but the least serious of traumatic brain injuries. Um, in order to diagnose a concussion, there are three parts: the impact test, the sideline assessment, and symptoms. So, the impact test, I know for at least in my high school, in my school district, we were required to take the impact test before we could play in a game. The impact test tests your memory, your reaction time, and cognitive skills. It ranges from all of this, and it is the worst thing ever. uh, it's a really hard test. People have actually failed the impact test that don't have a concussion, like they failed the baseline, so they would have to keep retaking it until they passed it. But basically, you take the baseline test, and so if you are suspected of a concussion, you'll take the impact test again, and if your results are lower or significantly lower than your baseline, well, you have a concussion. But this is a very hard test. I do not recommend anybody taking it. I've taken it a bunch. And you'll take this test over and over again until you get back up to where your baseline was or better. The next part is the sideline test. The sideline assessment is performed right there on the sideline, right after the initial suspected impact. So they start off by asking you your name, your date of birth, approximately what time it is, what's the last thing you remember, general questions. And then as they go on, they'll start asking you to repeat words, to repeat a sequence of numbers backwards. They'll make you do balance exercises to see if your balance is still there. And basically, if you fail this assessment, you'll then have to take the impact test again. And this will more than likely, regardless, I think you'll have to take it just to be safe nowadays. But this is the first test you'll take after the impact, and then you'll take the impact test again. And the third thing is symptoms. So let's say that you hit your head and now you have headaches, you're sensitive to light, you're sensitive to sound or anything. This is another way to see if you have a concussion, so you can go in and take that impact test to see if you fail it. Or anything along that line. The most common ones are headaches and sensitive to light and sound, changes in personality, and difficulty concentrating or slow responses. Those are the most common of the symptoms. There are more, but I chose the most common ones to list here. So your treatment is very dependent on, one, who you are. Most concussions are healed. 90% of people diagnosed with a concussion are healed within 2 weeks. 10% of people that aren't healed then later might develop post-concussion syndrome. And this happens when your symptoms persist longer than the 2-week periods. They can go on for months, years after you've gained that concussion. The high-risk individuals are females and younger children. It is very serious in children, especially if they develop this at a young age, because it can really disrupt their school. They're dealing with symptoms on a constant basis. They're out from their normal routine, and it makes them become depressed because they can't be normal because they have the headaches and all the other whatever symptoms they may have going on. And so they become severely depressed, and they have seen cases where the student has committed suicide due to feeling of isolation. Women, their symptoms tend to last longer in men. From what I found, is they don't really know the reason. They have like two causes, right? Females tend to report their symptoms more than men, so it might be a reason as to why their symptoms are longer. Another is females do tend to have a softer skull than men, so they're more susceptible to getting concussions. But regardless of which reason it might be, they test lower than men for in simple reaction time, complex reaction time, and processing speed. Um, Treatment for PCS is basically this personalized physical therapy, but for your brain. Depending on what you need help in, like for me, I had to go and learn how to balance again. I lost my balance. I could not balance. So all of my exercises were based on balance. But if you have problems concentrating or vision problems, like you can't stand light or sound bothers you, your exercises will be based on that. Treatment can go anywhere for a couple weeks to months, maybe years. My treatment lasted for 6 months, and I hated it because most of the time I had a huge headache from working out. So it wasn't. It's hard, and it gets very discouraging, especially when you're going so many times and you don't feel like you're getting better. Um, so the next thing is second impact syndrome. This happens when a patient receives a second, like blow to the head or anything that makes the brain jolt again before the initial impact has healed yet. This ultimately makes the brain vulnerable, and death is imminent. Most people that are suspected to have second impact die within 2 to 5 minutes. There is no treatment for it. There is a lot of debate on whether or not second impact syndrome is real or not. Most people want to ignore it and say it doesn't exist, but there are signs where a person with a concussion has sustained a second impact and ultimately died from because of the second impact. So research is still being done on that. It's not very prominent, and it's actually very rare. Number of people have actually died from it, but every single case they've had has died. So the next thing is chronic traumatic encephalopathy. This is probably a much more controversial talk. It is caused by repetitive blows to the head, and by repetitive blows, I don't just mean concussions. It can also happen, like, say, for example, somebody was constantly, like, hitting your brain with, like, just knocking on your brain, just going, like that to your brain. Every single day, every single, like, second of the day, and you will actually develop chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So it is very common among athletes that are in those sports where there's constant hits that might come to that like hits to the head, like boxing, football, soccer, all of that. It can only be diagnosed post-mortem. So most of the people that have it, they're originally diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's because it's very similar. And we can't know until after a person has died whether or not they truly have it. Some people that have had CTE, Mike Webster was the first person diagnosed to it. Diagnosed with CTE. It was found by Dr. Bennett Amalu. He actually, when he examined Mike's Webster's brain, was actually very surprised of what he saw. Mike's body was in terrible shape, and when he opened up his brain, it looked healthy. It wasn't until he cut open the brain that he actually saw all the tau protein that was released and all the folds and how terrible shape his brain was in. But this isn't always true. The brain doesn't always look nice on the outside and then terrible on the inside. Andre Waters, his brain, he was 44, he committed suicide, and his brain looked the exact same as somebody who was 83 and had Alzheimer's. So it it's a very progressive disease. And it causes your personality to change significantly. Pretty much everyone on this list except Mike Webster committed suicide. Aaron Hernandez and Chris Boynton both murdered other people before they committed suicide. Aaron Hernandez obviously committed suicide in jail after he got caught for murdering his sister's fiance. But both of these, their brains were in terrible shape. Aaron Hernandez, he was 27 when he died. His brain was the worst case of CTE they have ever seen for someone his age. They have never seen anybody younger than him have a brain as bad as his was, and or anybody else's age have a brain that bad. So if he hadn't committed suicide or get arrested or any of that, it would have been interesting to see what would have happened to his brain if he continued to play football. I honestly, I don't even know what his brain could even be like. But that is my project. I do want to say that concussions are very serious, and if you suspect that you have one, you should report it. Most case By not reporting it, you're putting yourself more at risk. I know it is hard because it's something that you can't really see. You can't see the injury. You look at a scan on an MRI scan and it's not there. So it's an injury that can't be diagnosed. Well, you can't see. So the injury is unpredictable. So you don't know how long it will last, and it's very serious if it goes untreated. It can lead to more damage along the line. And yeah.